1 de la mañana, Kaja Kallas ha estado hablando en paralelo, estábamos viendo a Dombrovskis. Kaja Kallas es la que ya ha tomado posesión, ¿no?, desde hace unos meses alrededor de ese superministerio de Exteriores, sustituye a Josep Borrell. Kaja Kallas ha dicho que en tiempos turbulentos, es decir, acepta que vivimos en un entorno de tiempos turbulentos, debemos permanecer unidos. Dice que hay fuerza de sobra para derrotar a los países que luchan contra Europa. Es el mensaje claro de intentar unir a Europa alrededor de una fortaleza que habrá que crear sobre cómo en este entorno de tiempos turbulentos, dicho por Kaja Kallas, hay que permanecer unidos porque vienen tiempos turbulentos para Europa. Pero dice, hay fuerza de sobra en Europa para derrotar a los países que luchan contra Europa. Escuchemos a Kaja Kallas, un poco con decalaje de cuando ha dicho esas palabras, sobre lo que está diciendo en el Parlamento Europeo.
Now we are working on another, a 16th package of sanctions. We have started to see Russia's economy taking a serious hit. They could not afford to continue their efforts in Syria while fighting in Ukraine. Russia's national funds are quickly depleting. The national interest rate is well over 20%. And they are getting far fewer resources from gas and oil. Gazprom and Sberbank are looking at mass layoffs. There is absolutely no doubt that we can do more to help Ukraine. With our help, they can also win the war. The only language that Putin speaks is the language of strength. The EU has strength. Together, EU member states' economies are 17 times bigger than that of Russia's economy. We must force his hand to show him that he will lose, and stop him before he attacks one of our own. At the root of Europe's strength is our political and economic union. This is why, as soon as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania left the Soviet prison, we all joined the European Union and NATO and swore that we will never be alone again. Together, we are just so much stronger. From bitter competition to peaceful and constructive competition. This is how Robert Schuman described the Union of Europe's coal and steel sectors in 1950. Of course, he was talking about removing the possibility for Europeans to wage war on each other. And it led to enduring peace between us. Today, we face war from outside. It's time to come together again. As we integrated our economies before, today we need integration in defense and interoperability on the ground. We do not need a European army. We need 27 European armies that are capable and can effectively work together to deter our rivals and defend Europe, preferably with our allies and partners, but alone if needed. An incrementalist approach to defense cannot work. We must stop tiptoeing around. This agency lives and breathes European defense, but the rest of us need to do it as well. In practice, this means, first, the EU population that understands what is at stake. Second, more spending on defense. Third, a society that is prepared for this. Fourth, EU member states with strong military capabilities and strong defense industries. And fifth, more cooperation with our partners. This is what we are now looking for in our white paper and the preparedness strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, many of our national intelligence agencies are giving us the information that Russia could test EU's readiness to defend itself in 3 to 5 years. Who else are we listening to if not them? We need to have public understanding of the threats we face. Close to 80% of Europeans are in favor of common defense and security policy among the European countries. Over 70% agree that the European Union needs to reinforce its capacity to produce military equipment. So I think our citizens know what is at stake, but politicians need to catch up too. Russia is not the problem for some, but for all of us. Europeans need to wake up. Last year, member states collectively spent an average 1.9% of GDP on defense. Russia is spending 9%. We spend billions on our schools, welfare, healthcare, but if we do not invest more in defense, all of this is at risk. Europe's failure to invest in military capabilities also sends a dangerous signal to the aggressor. Weakness invites them in. President Trump is right to say that we don't spend enough. It's time to invest. We need investment from member states and the private sector, but also from the common European budget. We must spend more than 1%. We need to relay a message that we are serious about our commitment to European defense. Even when we allocate enough money, we also cannot just go to the shop and buy a couple of tanks, air defense system and a couple of helmets. The decisions we make today will only materialize in years from now. 2 at best, but a decade in some cases. I know I'm talking to a room full of experts, and those at the European Defence Agency know very well. Defence is highly skilled, highly intense industry which requires money, people and time. We have money and people, but we don't have time. Ukraine is buying us time. No, we are not yet at war, not yet, but as my friend Mark Rutte said when he stood on this stage a few weeks ago, we are not at peace either. We need to prepare. There is nothing that cannot be weaponized against us today. Putin's regime is already undertaking increasingly brazen acts of sabotage, cyber attacks in Spain and Czechia, election interference in Romania and Moldova, parcel bombs in Germany, disinformation campaigns, jamming of GPS systems that stop aircraft from landing, damage to underwater cables. We are already the targets of a hybrid war. In December, for the first time ever, we imposed sanctions on for such attacks. 16 people and 3 companies were sanctioned. Last week, we adopted a plan for the cybersecurity of hospitals and healthcare providers. The security risk that the hospitals need to worry about a decade ago was some drug addicts coming and stealing the morphine. Today, cyber attack could turn off life-supporting machines, shut down operating theaters, and prevent patients from getting life-saving treatment. Today, this sector is the most attacked sector in the EU. We must include it in the discussions for defense. Hybrid attacks are often used to prelude to conventional attack, and they are conducted in parallel with the conventional attacks. As Sauli Niinistö's underlined in his report on preparedness, we must prepare for the worst. Ladies and gentlemen, the military needs capabilities and industrial strength from one member state to the next are hugely diverse. From ammunition to air defense, from long-range missiles to cyber defense, from military mobility to the need for protection of borders and underwater cables. This is also what explains the differences in approaches to defense as well as geography. Last week I met the member states to discuss what we should prioritize on the EU level. Because it is important that the member states agree where the EU can best support everyone to develop their capabilities. Beyond this, it is important to link the capability planning and EU defence industrial policy. This is why Commissioner Kubilius and I want to put forward an industrial output plan. Here we must also learn from our past experiences. The Million Rounds initiative for Ukraine was an Estonian idea, and although we have now delivered well over 1 million rounds, in the end it was too little, too late. We need to make sure that we can ramp up our defense industry and get the products we need on time. We need to join up what we know about our capability gaps and how much we are missing with our own industries can produce. Then we can see how best to help the industry produce this and work with our allies in the cases where we can't do it in-house. I see the EDA with an instrumental role here. For decades, Europe has produced strategic documents, roadmaps and declarations. It's time we move beyond to more missiles, tanks and ships. Russia might have few friends, but Europe has much more. The US, the UK, NATO. First, the United States. They are our strongest ally and must remain so. A strategically competitive and increasingly confrontational world needs us both, and our transatlantic bond at its strongest. As two of the most powerful economic blocs on the planet, we are a vital artery to the global economy, and our prosperity is intertwined. The EU is one of the biggest export markets for the US after Canada and Mexico. 65% of direct foreign investments to the US come from Europe. The transatlantic economy employs more than 60 million workers in onshore jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. And in Europe, US companies are earning more than 2.5 times more than they are from Asia. We also share a common vision for the safe world. Our adversaries are cooperating and coordinating their actions against us. We must work together against the axis of upheaval. The biggest concern for the United States is China. But the fact is that if we do not get Russia right, we will not get China right either. China is closely watching how the transatlantic community responds to Russia's invasion to Ukraine. We need to make sure that the lesson is learned. Aggression as a foreign policy tool can never pay off. Ukraine's security against Russia is security for us all. Weakness here would only feed the confidence of our strategic rivals. But the EU's message to the US is clear. We must do more for our own defense and shoulder a fair share of responsibility for Europe's security. And we can be a closer partner for the US in the Indo-Pacific. On UK, they have left the Union, but they have not left Europe. They're still part of Europe. And they are one of our strongest military powers in Europe. The UK is a key partner for the European Union. We need a mutually beneficial relationship on security and defense. A new agreement on this would be a logical next step. This brings me to the NATO cooperation. NATO remains the foundation of collective defense and is crucial for the Euro-Atlantic security. The EU and NATO have 23 members in common. We are the most natural partners. And at the time when we worry about attacks against us, we need to concentrate our EU defense capability priorities where they are most needed. Less crisis management, more collective defense. This is what the European Defence Agency should help with too. Because every EU member state has a single set of defence planners and one defence budget. With this approach, the EU will support NATO, we will support each other's work, not duplicate each other's efforts. 20 years after the European Defence Agency was born, I don't think we are seeing the full potential of this agency yet. I want it to do more, and this will also complement NATO's work on fragmentation across 11 main categories of major weapon systems, aircraft, ground vehicles, and combat vessels. The US has 32, and we, in Europe, we have 172. In practice, this fragmentation pushes the costs up, limits interoperability, and creates logistical issues. Ukraine receives several different types of artillery systems and shells from us. They have had to adjust their guns when they are firing. We need to consolidate our defense industry and develop common weapon systems. Our European defense industry could then use...
Pues seguiremos pendientes de lo que dice la jefa de la diplomacia comunitaria. Nosotros tenemos que volver a poner la mirada en los mercados. Búsqueda de